When Pigasso Met Mootoose by Nina Laden. There once was a young pig named Pigasso. While the other piglets rolled in the mud and played games, Pigasso painted. He painted anything and everything, and in the most unusual way. At the same time, there once was a young bull named Mootoose. Mootoose was not like the other bulls. He wasn't interested in bullfighting. Mootoose was happy only when he painted pictures, and he painted big, bold, bright pictures. In time, word of Pigasso's talent spread throughout the pig provinces. Soon, art-loving pigs from all over lined up to buy his creations. At the same time, Mootoose was getting famous in the cattle community. There weren't many households that didn't own a moosterpiece. Pigasso and Mootoose were becoming art superstars, but this came with a price. Everybody wanted to see them. Art buyers, art sellers, art students, art historians, art groupies. It was an art attack. One day, Pigasso got fed up and said, "I'm tired of this noisy pig pen." At the same time, Mootoose declared, "I'm sick of this crowded cow town." Needing a change, they both decided to look for a peaceful place where they could paint without distractions. So each of the two artists looked far and wide for the perfect spot. Pigasso found a lovely farm looking towards the east. Mootoose found a handsome farm facing the west. After Pigasso moved in, he went to introduce himself to his new neighbor across the road. At the same time, Mootoose went to introduce himself to his new neighbor across the road. That is how Pigasso met Mootoose. And coincidentally, that is how Mootoose met Pigasso. At first, Pigasso and Mootoose were friendly and welcomed each other as neighbors. But soon, things began to change. It started one day when Pigasso criticized one of Mootoose's paintings. Then Mootoose made fun of one of Pigasso's. Mootoose called Pigasso an art hog. Then Pigasso called Mootoose a mad cow. Mootoose quipped, "You paint like a 2-year-old." Pigasso retorted, "You paint like a wild beast." Mootoose raged, "Your colors look like mud." Pigasso spat, "Your paintings look like color by numbers." Then things got really out of hand. It was a modern art mess. Pigasso stormed off into his house. "That Mootoose doesn't like my art," he huffed. "Well, I'll show him." And Mootoose bullied his way into the house. "I'll give that Pigasso something he can really criticize," he snorted. Then a full-scale feud erupted, but it was a most unusual battle. Armed with ladders and buckets of paint, Mootoose launched the first attack. He started at dawn. By the end of the evening, he had succeeded in transforming the outside of his house into a monster-sized moosterpiece. Not to be outdone, Pigasso fired up his paintbrushes and, in full view of the enemy, counterattacked. He turned his farm into a huge and outrageous pork of art. The two artists then retreated into their houses and pulled down the shades. Pigasso certainly didn't want to look out his window and stare at a Mootoose, and Mootoose had no desire to give his rooms a view of a Pigasso. This presented a problem, and there seemed to be only one solution. Without a word to each other, Pigasso and Mootoose each began to build a huge wooden fence down the middle of their road. At first, Pigasso and Mootoose seemed satisfied. Both artists went back to painting by themselves. But after a while, Pigasso was surprised to find that he missed that bull-headed Mootoose. At the same time, Mootoose found his studio empty without the presence of pig-headed Pigasso. Pigasso pondered. That Mootoose isn't such a bad artist. He has some interesting ideas. Mootoose moaned. That Pigasso may not paint like me, but he knows what he's doing. However, being naturally pig-headed and bull-headed, neither artist knew how to apologize to each other. So they did what they do best. They let their paintbrushes do the talking. Pigasso painted on one side of the fence and Mootoose painted on the other. Each worked until they were exhausted. It was strangely quiet when they were done. Then, curious to see what Mootoose had been doing, Pigasso sprinted around to the other side. At the same time, Mootoose galloped over to Pigasso's side. The silence was broken as the two artists began laughing at their amazing work of art. From that day on, Pigasso and Mootoose became great friends. They happily took down the fence and shared their different views. A few months later, a big museum bought the fence. Pigasso called his side when Pigasso met Mootoose. Mootoose called his side when Mootoose met Pigasso. The critics called it incredible. The end. The true story of Pigasso and Matisse. Picasso and Matisse were not a pig and a bull, but they were characters. They were two of the finest artists of the 20th century. While they were never neighbors, they became close in the small world of art. Henri Matisse was born on December 31st, 1869 in France. Matisse didn't want to be an artist when he was little. He studied to be a lawyer. But when he was 21, he got sick with appendicitis. While he was getting better, he painted his first painting. He liked the painting so much that he ended his law career. Pablo Picasso was born on October 25, 1881 in Spain. His father was an art teacher who helped Picasso start painting when he was very young. It was soon obvious that he was very talented. Picasso studied painting in Barcelona and Madrid, two big cities in Spain. But as he was growing as an artist, Picasso decided to move to Paris, which was and still is a great city for art. That is where Picasso met Matisse. Both Picasso and Matisse were gaining recognition as artists in Paris. In fact, two Americans named Leo and Gertrude Steen, who lived there, started collecting their paintings. In 1906, Gertrude Steen had a party, and that is where Picasso and Matisse met for the first time. At first, Picasso and Matisse were friendly to each other. They even traded paintings. Matisse also gave Picasso an African mask which inspired him to paint in a primitive style, a style he became very famous for. But soon it became apparent that Picasso and Matisse were becoming rivals and competitors. Picasso said some bad things about Matisse's paintings, and Matisse said some bad things about Picasso's. But over time, the two artists learned to respect each other and became lifelong friends. They both owned many of each other's paintings. Matisse once told Picasso, "We must talk to each other as much as we can. When one of us dies, there will be some things the other will never be able to talk of with anyone else." Matisse died in 1954. Picasso died in 1976. But their art lives on in many museums, galleries, and private collections around the world.